Cheryl Burman to LK Wilde Meets. Um, Cheryl is originally from Australia, but now
hmm
lives in the Forest of Dean. And you describe yourself as a multi-genre author, but also now an editor, which I know firsthand because you've just edited my latest book very, very well. So I think we met in the very early days of Twitter, or not early days, but pre-X.
Yeah,
And then we've just kept an eye on
in
what each other's
touch.
doing.
Yeah,
Yeah, kept in
yeah.
touch. And now we've started working together, which is actually very fun. But this is the first time we've spoken properly,
Yeah.
well, via a screen. But would you like to just introduce yourself and maybe say a bit about your books and how you got into
Yes,
writing?
certainly. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Laura, for having me here. It's lovely. And it is really lovely to actually chat to you for the first time because, as you said, I did do an interview with you, a written interview with you when I had my newsletter. You were one
Mm,
of my early interviewees when I think pretty much Queenie of Norwich was about your only book out at the time. It was
mm.
that long ago, though you have been very prolific over the last few years. So me, yes, as you said, I'm originally from Australia, ended up in the Forest of Dean by pure chance via several years in Switzerland, where I worked, and which was a lovely experience. So I'm a long time out of Oz, but as they say, you can take the girl out of Australia, but you can never really take Australia out of the girl. So you can hear my accent still. Though lots of people say, where are you from? They rarely get Australia.
Really?
New Zealand, South Africa, yeah. So I make them guess. I didn't take up writing until I had actually retired from my day job, which was why we came to the forest because we moved out of London to go and do the country thing. Because every Australian woman wants an English cottage in the country somewhere. So I had my English cottage. I got that out of my system, and now we live sensibly in the town where things are much more accessible. But it's lovely. And I had, however, always wanted to write. And when I was a kid, I used to scribble stories, that invariably involve children going through wardrobes and things like that. And but life, kids, busy, career, blah, 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 you never get to it. And when we came here, my very first book actually was, I wonder if you can see this, was this one, because we had the compulsory dog, Darling Sam, and Sam and I had spent hours learning our way around the forest. And my husband, who's very tech savvy, said one day, why don't you write a book of dog walks? So this was in the day before, so the days before your phone did everything. So I had my little digital camera and he gave me this little tracker thing. And Sam and I would explore and I would take my notebook and write down all these routes and so on. And that book's now been selling well for 13 years.
Wow.
And in fact, I have to drop 2 dozen copies off at our local craft and arts centre after this for their Christmas market. So that was really good. So that was me and the dog writing. But then in terms of actually getting into novel writing, I was also heavily involved in something in 2010-11, which was a campaign to save our public forests across the UK. And that was, it was a huge event at the time. The government was suggesting that maybe we should just sell these forests off, and other people can do things with them, etc., etc. And you don't say a thing like that to foresters who have been there many times before over centuries,
Mm.
but threats to our forests. So here there was a huge campaign, and I inveigled myself onto the steering group and got very involved with that. But it was a couple of years after that, I was wandering through the forest with the dog, and I suddenly thought, maybe that fight to save the forest would make a good basis for a story. And kids' fantasy, and a little girl who has to rally the troops, the wild animals, and they fight against some invading force to save their forest. So that's how my first books were born, the Guardians of the Forest trilogy, which I completely re-edited myself a few years later. having learned a bit more about writing craft by that time. And then after that, something that I had also wanted to write was a story loosely based on my own mother's life in Australia. And from that came something completely different, which was Keepers, which is 1950s historical women's fiction set
Which
in Oz.
I will say I have read and is an absolutely beautiful book. If
Thank you,
anybody
Laura.
wants is looking for something historical, and it's also actually 1950s is still within lots of people's living memory or parents,
Well,
it's very
well, this
relatable.
Yes, exactly. Well, my best market for that, interestingly, has been the US. Australia, they don't really want to know the English. Yeah, I mean, people who do read it, like say it's really lovely, but I've never been able to make bulk sales here with it. But Americans love it because they love being transported to somewhere that they never knew, they don't know anything about.
Mm.
And I get some really funny comments because one of the characters in it, based on my dad, he was a Cockney immigrant post World War II with his family to Australia. And my mother was Australian, and they met on a migrant camp or on a camp because of the housing shortages. And somebody commented about it was so interesting to hear what happened to these people when they were transported to Australia after the war. I said, we have two histories going on there. Never mind. She loved the book anyway. um, and then I kind of turned my hand to historical fantasy with my book, River Witch, which is set here in the forest. And I
Also a brilliant
slowly,
book.
oh,
Oh,
thank you.
I will endorse that one fully too.
Well, that one's proving quite popular around here at the moment. We've had a new bookstore just open up in Newent on the edge of the Forest of Dean called Toadstools. And if you are anywhere near the forest, Gloucester, etc., that part of the world, please support Holly. She's doing a fantastic job. She stocks mostly indie books, but she does have a range,
Does
kids'
she have
books.
a website?
Yes,
We can-
she does. She's mostly on Facebook,
If
Toadstools Bookshop.
if you
Yes,
want to give me the link, I'll put it so people watching, I'll put it in the description so people can go and find her on
yeah,
Facebook or
yeah,
whatever. So we'll
yeah,
put
yeah.
that in there.
I'll send you the link.
Okay.
And yeah, she only opened up in November, October, and she's got this little 1-year-old boy. She's got a little girl who's at school, but she takes Douglas with her to the shop, which an active 1-year-old in a bookshop, bit of a nightmare. Um, but I've just taken over 10 more copies to her this morning of River Witch, which is really, really nice. So it's kind of across the range. I do short stories as well. In fact, I've just uploaded to KDP a short story, which is a side story to River Witch about Mother Lovell, the old crone in that book. Somebody asked for, tell us her background. So I wrote it for an anthology, which never happened. So I just shoved it up on KDP and put 99 cents on it, and people
Mm.
are buying it, which is nice. So it's a very long answer. I'm sorry, Laura.
No. What is it that makes you want to write in so many different genres? Is it that you love reading those, or is it that you just get a story idea and it just fits with a certain genre, or just to keep things interesting?
Yeah, I think I do. I suspect I suffer from ADHD, but I do get bored easily. I think they're refreshingly different. I mean, writing the middle grade fantasy, which has fans of, well into their 80s as well, that was really great because you could just sit there and just write. Okay, it's all made up. You
Mm.
don't have to check anything and so on. But as you know very well, writing historical fiction is a completely different kettle of
Mm.
fish. I was lucky with Keepers because, say it very quietly, the 1950s, a bit later than the book, is a time I actually remember from my childhood. So there are a lot of descriptions in there, like the houses where people live and so on, which, and going to the to Luna Park at the seafront and so on. I remember those from a small child.
Mm.
And somebody actually commented about the amount of detailed research I'd done that made all this so come alive. And I just laughed and said, well, that's because I lived it. What you know. Um, but then, of course, I did have to look up things like, what was rationing like really in Australia just after the war and all this kind of
Mm.
thing. So bits and bobs. Um, River Witch, again, being partly fantasy or historical fantasy and knowing the forest. And we have lots of legends and so on associated here. So places like, do you remember the well, St. Chena's Well, where um, where Hester goes, and that's where she meets her friends Catherine, the
Yeah.
well in the middle of the forest, and she has this kind of mystical experience. That's actually based on a real well, not that's in the forest, called St. Anthony's Well, which
Ah.
sadly somebody had put on Instagram and now apparently is a major traipsing site for tourists, but it used to be very hidden away. So things like that to draw on, and the legend of Sabrina being the goddess of the river, and all those kinds of things. So I did a little bit of research around those to kind of use those. And then things like, how did they actually milk cows in the late 19th century? What was the farm like? What was the farmer-tenant relationship like? And, those bits and pieces. And of course, in River Witch, because it's based a lot on herbal and spiritual, mystical medicines, the use of herbs and flowers. What's local here? What were they used for? How did they make it? And so on and so on. So that was quite fun doing
Mm.
all that. So, I'm a bit tempted right now to go back to writing something that is either just another, like the Keeper spin-offs, where I can just write it,
Mm.
or some more fantasy, just for a rest.
I can really relate to that because that's why I alternate historical and contemporary because
Yeah.
I love my brain gets a good workout with the historical, but then I just want to be able to write. I don't want to have to keep stopping every 5 minutes to check I've got a fact right or hours researching before you can even get going. So I can
Um,
relate to wanting to do different things.
yes. Well, it's like the third book. Actually, the Hopeless Daughters wasn't so bad because I said the Australian section and the 1997 section and so on was okay and set in the forest. So I know the forest. I did have a lot of help there from a really good friend of mine, Avril, who used to be the Gloucestershire archivist, and she's well and truly retired now. But she's extremely active and she's still writing books herself, historical kind of based on old family. Her husband is an old forest family.
Ah.
Um, and with lots of fascinating background. But I kind of picked Avril's brains for how would my modern day heroine go about researching family history at that time in the forest, pre-internet and so on. And she was just such a wealth. She just took me through it step by
Wow.
step what you had to do. It was fantastic. So that was really useful. But at the moment, I'm writing the third book in that series, which is now being called the Wise Women series. And I have my protagonist. She spent some time in Bristol in the early 1900s. And even though I live 45 minutes from Bristol, I have to confess I haven't been there very often.
Ah.
But I do have a friend of a friend who's been really useful there. He's an author as well. And he's lived there all his life and he's written stuff about Bristol and so on. Mike. So we had a Zoom call and I picked his brains and he's going, he said, come over and we'll walk it. And I've been meaning to do that, but circumstances have meant I haven't been able to yet.
That sounds great though, like collaborative working and bringing, because it's such a lonely process writing a book, isn't it? And actually, if you're able to connect with other people for parts of the research or advice, actually that's it really changes how it
It, it,
feels.
it does. And, I mean, there's so much you can do on Google, on the internet, like looking at maps and satellite views and all this kind of thing, getting the information. But I mean, for example, talking to Mike, we decided that the house where my protagonist Rose boards is actually his house because it was a
Oh,
boarding house at some stage. And what was really lovely, and I love these kinds of coincidences, is Rose is a foundling, and the view from the back of my friend's house is of what used to be an orphanage.
Oh,
So of course I was able. Then they had 1,000 kids in there at one stage,
yeah.
and so of course I was able to slip that into the story of Rose being able to look out her bedroom window and see this orphanage, which was still an orphanage in those days,
Mm.
and thinking about her experience versus those kids' experience, and and the housemaid in the boarding house comes from the orphanage. Because that's what they used to do. They train the kids up to be
Oh,
maids
cool.
and other useful citizens. And, it's something like that. You never get that from the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
Uh,
from local knowledge and coincidence, and that's where like the magic comes from, really, isn't it? Is those
yeah,
unexpected little pieces of information you find or
yeah,
strange connections.
yeah.
Um, so if given you started writing after you had a career, is there anything that's really surprised you about what it's like to actually be a published author? Like, did you have any preconceptions beforehand that have been blown out of the water?
Oh, yes.
Like being rich and famous, that we all think
Yeah.
go.
All right. So everybody belt up for the big laugh, especially those who in the industry. Is when I first wrote my first Guardians book, and originally it was just one book. So I looked up agents. I saw, oh, this Curtis Brown lot, they're a big agent. I'll send it to them. So this was like September, October. I thought I have an answer by Christmas, and then we can get organised and all the rest of it. And I mean, bless them, they were really sweet. They did actually respond, which, as you know from experience, many agents don't.
Mm.
And they were very polite and suggested that this wasn't quite what they were looking for at the time. And I just look back at my hubris, I suppose, at the time, that this was all going to be so easy. And of course, you learn that it's not,
Mm.
and it takes a long time, and you have to kind of plug away. And there's so many things, especially being self-published, that you have to learn. You have to learn to do a website. You have to learn how to use social media. You have to learn, well, as I said, I did do a newsletter for several years, but I gave that up when MailerLite changed everything. And I just thought, this isn't worth my time anymore. So I gave that up. But I did enjoy it at the time. Um, and you have to learn how to manipulate your KDP dashboard and how to upload things and all this kind of thing. There's so much technology
Mm.
and around it, as well as just purely flogging your books.
Yeah. It's multiple jobs rolled into one, really, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Mm.
We really do have to multitask, and we have to be very broad-brushed people.
Yeah.
And this is where authors who kind of say, "Oh, I hate the marketing side, etc., etc." And it's not about standing on your soapbox, literally saying, "Buy my book, buy my book, buy my book." It's about gradually getting the word out and letting people know.
Mm.
My
It is
local writing
necessary.
friends, who are all English, excuse my self-promotional behavior on the basis that I'm Australian, so they forgive me for it, but they couldn't do it.
I think it is such a hard thing to put yourself and put your work out in the world and then say, and maybe someone might like to read it. It's so
Yes.
uncomfortable,
Well, it
but
was what we were
necessary.
saying before, wasn't it? That that one person who kind of says to you completely out of context somewhere that they loved your book.
Mm.
That stranger in America who writes that wonderful review that says, I picked this up because the woman on the cover looked like an old school friend of mine, and wow. And you go, oh, okay. I'm validated.
They're the best, absolute best moments. So what made you decide to um not leave the writing but add editing to your workload, your already very busy schedule?
It was, I've done it for friends for several years. And so I've I mean, I hope I've learned quite a bit about the kind of editing process. But also, I am a huge fan of writing craft. So as part of my newsletter, I used to do a monthly writing tips, which I put on my website. And I haven't done any of those for quite some time. I kind of didn't quite run out. So, yeah, there's one I want to do about symbolism, and there's a couple of workshops I'm doing for a local secondary school in Gloucester early next year. So I'll be doing some research on whatever it is that I do with them. And I'm doing one on time and place, getting time and place in your book, for a Dean Writers Circle Writing Day in April. So it was that kind of interest and looking at other people's books and working with other authors, as friends to kind of, help them through. And some were really responsive, others, because we have a novel group in Dean Writers Circle, and others, it just kind of like, yeah, sure. And then they move on. It's all a bit too hard for them. So you quickly learn where to focus your energy. And I enjoyed it. I enjoy editing my own books, and I enjoy editing other people's books. So I thought, okay, I'll hang up my shingle and see who bites. And God bless you, Laura, you did.
I was like, oh, this sounds amazing. And then when I got your notes through, I was just thinking, how have you been able to spot all this? And I have to admit, I hate editing. I like getting the story done, and then I hate the editing part. But when I was working through your suggestions, it was my best editing experience because I felt like I was improving the story. And that's the value of having a second pair of eyes look at your work because you can't see it. You're way too close by the time you
Yeah,
finish.
yeah.
And also, like I felt I was learning things as I went. Well, I can't promise that I will have retained that by the time I send you the next.
I
But
hope
it definitely
not.
really helped the process and thinking, oh yeah, of course those timings make zero sense. But when you're in
Yeah.
the middle of it,
Oh,
you
I
can,
went and checked that and checked that and checked that because I thought I don't want to give her a wrong steer on this. So, no, she definitely said that happened then and that happened then. And so, but
yeah.
yeah, that's the kind of thing that kind of, as you say, when you're writing it, it's what I said about the spreadsheet. When I wrote my dual timeline, The Herbalist Daughters, I wrote the um, the historical story first, the story about Hester and Aaron. I wrote that first, the whole thing. So then I knew the appropriate times to put in the modern story and what Mara, the modern heroine, finds along each way, but kind of trying to work out, so what am I going to tell the reader now? Because are they going to learn it from the historical story, or are they going to learn it from the research Mara's doing? And then I'll tell them in the historical story which way do I go about it, etc. And as I said, it was really quite a challenge. That I've had some really nice compliments about, working seamlessly across the timelines.
Oh, that's
Um,
brilliant.
but maybe I'll tackle another. I'm thinking maybe for my next one, after the current one's finished, I might do the next one in this series as a dual timeline. Um, so
It's
yeah.
definitely a challenge. I've started so many books out as dual timeline, and I always end up being like, oh no, let's just let's just do the one timeline and get it right.
It's yeah, I mean, you just don't realize when you're actually reading them, because I am a fan. I mean, you asked me that before, do I like to read this stuff? Yes, I love fantasy, not the kind of the popular romantasy epic fantasy. I'm not quite so much into that. But certainly I was raised on Narnia, Lord of the Rings,
Mm.
and so on. I love who wrote it? Um, the something of Addie LaRue, it's Victoria Schwab.
Oh,
Um, The Life and Times of Addie LaRue. It's a brilliant book. That kind of fantasy is so clever,
mm.
so clever. Adored that. Is that Victoria Schwab? Schwab. Um, and I do love historical fiction. One of my, well, I have several favorite authors. Sebastian Faulks is one. Um, uh, William Oh, anyway, I think of his name on that. Boyd, William
Oh,
Boyd is another one. I read anything by him. He is such a diverse writer, and his research is just incredible. But he just pulls it together into beautiful stories. And Kate Morton, fellow Australian, she is another of my favorites, and she does dual timelines
wow.
mostly um, as well. So, in fact, her it might not be her latest anymore, but it was when I read it a year or so ago. Homecoming is set in Australia and the UK, and it's set in the 1950s in the Adelaide Hills, which is where my Keeper's books are set.
Oh, wow.
So me and Kate, you know.
You have to send her yours and say, I think you pinched.
Well, I kind of every now and then I think, do I have the guts to actually do that?
You'd probably be delighted.
Yeah, that's it. I wrote mine before you wrote yours, so I
Yeah.
didn't copy
Maybe she
you.
read yours and stole the idea. You never know. Oh no,
Oh,
that's probably
could
like
be.
I don't want to get sued for
No, 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 no,
spreading
no.
false rumors.
It's a very, very different book. Hers is a murder mystery, and it's yeah, it's very good. She's great, great author. Love her work.
Right, well, how are we doing? I think I might move on, if that's right, to some quick fire questions.
Yeah, sure. I
Yeah.
promise to be quick fire in my answer.
You get, well, to be honest, I've done a few of these. No one's managed to be quick fire yet, so I wouldn't worry.
Okay,
And I
you
don't
can
even
never.
manage to say the questions in a quick fire way. So, um, right, we'll attempt these. Okay, do you prefer typing or to use a pen and paper?
Oh God, I
We'll
have.
stick with writing for now, shall we, rather than editing? So answer
Oh,
me.
well, for anything. I mean, my handwriting is so dreadful. I don't even write my shopping lists anymore. I put them all on my phone. Um, the only time I actually write anything is we have a monthly writing workshop locally where we each take along a prompt and we just spend 10 minutes just quick fire writing rubbish, mostly all mine are rubbish. It's amazing what some people come out with. Some of my colleagues, beautiful poems in 10 minutes.
Oh, wow. That
Yeah,
sounds an
yeah,
amazing exercise to do, just to completely
yeah,
free your brain and just
yeah.
go
Yeah,
for it.
exactly. And when I try to read them back, because we maybe do three and then we choose one to read back or something, and I'm always, what's that word? What's that word? So my brain goes ahead of handwriting, so I do prefer to type. Yes, so typing.
Have you ever tried dictating? Because I've been doing some of that recently, and
When I'm wandering through the forest and I have an idea about a scene or something like that, then I pick up. I mean, if I lose this, there's my salmon, my lovely salmon.
oh,
If I lose that, I'm dead in the water. Um, I will dictate into my phone, looking around to make sure there's nobody near, which there invariably isn't. Um, so just ideas and things I'll dictate.
mm.
But no, I think I have to see the words on the page. I'm very lucky in that I was taught touch typing when I was 13.
Wow.
They were in the days, I mean, on an old Underwood, manual typewriter, because the school I went to decided that the kids in the A stream had to learn something practical. So once a week, the girls were sent off to learn typing and the boys were sent off to learn woodwork.
Can you
And
imagine how they tried to do
I, I've always been grateful for that because I can touch type.
Yeah, it's come in handy.
Yeah, for that lovely prejudice, and it was wonderful. And of course, I've typed all through my career on computers and so on, or most of it.
Mm,
Yeah. So
that's
yeah,
a good skill. Okay, so when you are writing, do you prefer to have a tea, a coffee, or something else on the go beside you, or nothing maybe?
I have a schedule. So in the morning, I have tea, black tea, a very fancy Assam leaf tea that my kids bought me for Christmas a few years ago, and I've had to keep on doing. I have a coffee mid-morning, a plunger coffee mid-morning, which if I don't have, I'm a bit ratty. At lunchtime, I have tea again, and then in the afternoon, I either have a peppermint tea or I have another coffee. Um, and then before I go to bed, I have a chamomile tea. So I should have a glass of water beside me, actually. That is the one thing that I always think, I should do that. And sometimes
Mm.
I do
I always
because,
forget water.
yeah, it's very easy to kind of, not drink enough when you're sitting. Um, but I also have what I call my bossy watch, my, what is it, iPhone watch, which tells me to get up and move around every hour.
Oh, that's very useful.
Yes.
Because you can get
So,
engrossed, can't you, and not realize how much time's
yeah.
gone by.
Yeah, yeah. And so I spread out my household chores like making beds and things like that during the day. So I've got something productive to do. When my watch says time to move, I go, okay. And I rush upstairs and make a bed. This kind
That's probably
and it
quite good
goes,
for just
good
resetting
girl, you
your
did it.
brain. I need one of those. I need a bossy watch, I think.
Yeah, well, it does help because it kind of, gets the blood moving. I
Yeah.
also like to go walking every morning as well. And mostly in the forest. Though I'm lucky where we live now, we're opposite a lovely park and not far from the lake and all the rest of it, that I can walk if I'm really pressed for time or whatever. But
Mm.
mostly I like to take myself into the woods with my walking stick and do what a good friend of mine calls a yomp around the forest.
That's a brilliant word. Okay. When you're reading, do you prefer ebooks, paperbacks, or audio?
I mix them up. I'm quite addicted to my Kindle because it's light, it's easy to read. But I've just had a bit of a Kindle stretch, and we went into Gloucester the other day, and I went to Waterstones and bought some paperbacks. So I've got those sitting there, and I read every day. I get through somewhere between 4 to 6 books every month.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's just an ingrained habit in me.
Mm.
Um, I mean, to be really blunt, I don't think you can be a really good writer unless you read reasonably often.
Mm.
People who say, "Oh, I only read my own books," limiting. Um, and I know people find it really hard to find the time to read, but if you give up a little bit of your social media time,
Mm.
and I read over breakfast and over lunch, and
Oh.
I've given up watching television because I just can't find anything that holds my
Mm.
interest for any length of time. And so in the evenings I read
Mm.
as well. And I just find that it's much more relaxing than
Mm.
watching, mindless rubbish on telly. So
I might try that and swap out some TV nights because I read before bed, but then I'm often so tired. I can only read a couple of pages and it takes me forever to get through a book.
I have been known to go to sleep with my book held firmly in my hand, doesn't even fall down. It's kind of like that. My husband's had to tell me the next day, take it gently away from you. So yeah, that is my other reading time is to go. But I'm bereft if I don't have a book on the go.
Mm.
Absolutely bereft. I just, like, oh, I need a book. I mean, I do have quite a bookcase of things to get through. Um, Well, my husband is a great sci-fi collector. So
Mm.
we have shelves and shelves of people like Neil Asher and somebody who was quite an influence on my books, Anne McCaffrey, people like that, old science fiction writers, as well as ones who are still going.
Mm.
But then I have my own quite vast collection as well. And despite best efforts, whenever we move, which we've done quite a lot, to get rid of boxes of books, they do keep on creeping back into the house.
You need a one in, one out system for
Oh,
the
God,
books.
no. I started to go back and reread some old ones. And in fact, each month I do a monthly review roundup on my website of books that I've read during the month,
Mm.
and either a full review for some of them or just some quick notes on others. And I started to go through and read books from my bookshelf, and I picked up one called The Girl Who Fell from the Sky, which was 2006, I think. About It's about a young woman who gets parachuted into France as part of the resistance from England.
Oh.
It's again fantastic research. I can't remember the author's name. Um, Fantastic research and a beautiful and quite tragic story, actually. It was lovely.
Oh, that sounds a good but heartbreaking one.
Mm.
Good. Okay, so where's your favorite place to write?
Here at my desk, because I have a big screen set up. So my laptop is kind of like just the computer base, and I have a big keyboard with half the keys of being wiped out because something to do with my nails or something on my left hand side. I don't have long fingernails, but it drives my husband mad whenever he wants to come and do something on my computer because the ERT and the whatever the next line are, they're just blank.
You have to get some
Yeah,
Tipp-Ex and paint them on.
yeah, yeah. I think my favorite writing space was the last house we lived in. I was able to turn there was a conservatory there, and I was able to turn that into my office. And it
Oh,
was lovely for most of the year, but in the midst of winter, even though we had it lined and everything, it just cost a fortune to heat. So I
mm.
would migrate then indoors. And when it was like 35 degrees, then. But for most of the year, I could work there. And that was lovely because I had two walls of windows looking out into the garden. And I could
Oh,
keep the door open and the dog could just mosey in and out and I
oh,
could
wow.
see him. And that's actually where we were there 7 years. And that's where I wrote most of my books, actually,
Wow.
in that conservatory.
I think
Yeah.
having light coming in, I know, well, I suppose some people probably like a more cave-like existence, but I find being in a light space so
Yeah.
much more
Well,
positive.
this room that I'm in now, it's a big room. It's the library, my office, and the overflow spare room. So it has a
Ah,
sofa bed in it as well. And it has windows facing both ends of the room, which is, as you can see, it's lovely and light
yeah,
in here. And this with the shutters up.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Right. Let me see what I've got left here. Oh, do you have a favorite book? I, either one of you, well, let's say, can you name a favorite of yours? Do you have one? And just a general favorite.
um, a favorite, I think my favorite book of mine might be The Herbalist's Daughters. I was saying this to somebody at the book fair, not the book fair, the craft market thingy I went to on Saturday night. Um, that Keepers, my first book for grown-ups, is certainly a favorite.
Mm.
And The Herbalist's Daughters, which at this time is my most recent book, I think is my other favorite. Um, I do I like I like them all. Um, but yeah, I would pop for The Herbalist's Daughters
Mm.
because I think carrying on that story of Hester and Erin and then introducing the new characters and combining, as one review puts it, two love stories compete for your heart, which was what
Oh,
on it.
that's amazing
Yeah,
review.
doing that was rather nice. So quite
Mm.
proud of that book.
Mm.
As for a general favorite, do you know, I'm going to be really, really boring and say the book I have read most is Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
And I haven't done it for 2 or 3 years, but I can still pick that up. And even though, you know everything that's going to happen there, I still get caught up in the story.
That's the mark of a very good book, isn't it?
Yeah. One of my other favorite books, I was just looking and seeing Maggie O'Farrell, because she's another one of my favorite authors.
Mm.
Um, and the first book I read of hers was Hamlet, which I thought was okay, but
Mm.
usually okay that I read. The next one was The Hand That First Held Mine.
Oh.
And if you want an emotional read, oh, wow. I mean, it is such a beautiful book. And I think that's her best work. Her work for me, it's always good, but it's a little variable, like all our work is. Um, but that is just, I mean, I would highly recommend that to anybody.
I might have to put that on my list. Even just the title alone makes me feel
Yes.
emotional.
Oh,
I don't even
yeah.
know what it's
It's
about.
just, no, it's just sort of like the whole way through. And the ending, I mean, I have a blog post about endings, about story endings. and the difference between flash fiction endings and novel endings, because they are very different.
Mm.
And I use that as one of the examples, without giving the story away. And it's just kind of like
Okay, that's
uplifting. Yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah.
That's
It's
good.
not. Yeah, it's just emotional.
I might make that my first read of 2026. That something uplifting and emotional to kick off the year. Okay, so we've only got a couple of questions left. Um, do you have an ideal fictional dinner party guest?
Kate Morton.
Ah, that was an easy one.
I think William Boyd would also be good. Oh, Margaret Atwood. I'm a huge Margaret Atwood fan. I always love it when people talk about the difficulties of writing cross genre, and you will get this too, of course, because you also do. And I hold Margaret Atwood up to them as an example and say, this is a woman who's written everything from dystopian science fiction to historical fiction to modern books to things that are, vaguely autobiographical. And she's just Margaret Atwood. And people like me just read anything she's written
Mm.
because we don't care what genre it is. We just love her writing. I had the huge privilege to actually listen to her speak at the Ledbury Poetry Festival several years ago. How they managed to con her into going to the Ledbury Poetry Festival, I don't know, but they did. And she looked a little bit bemused herself. She read some of her poetry and she talked for about an hour. And there was a woman sitting next to me who'd never read any of her stuff. And I kind of thought, what a waste of a seat. But she was impressed. And I buzzed for days afterwards. And I got her to sign a book, bought one that I think I already had. But anyway, I bought it anyway and got her to sign it. And just, kind of blustering, kind of like a 6-year-old going, I'm such a fan. Thank you.
I did that when I went to a talk by Anne Cleeves and I went to get a book signed afterwards and I was shaking, which is ridiculous.
Yes, I
But
was too.
she's a lovely lady. She's just an author. I know lots of authors, nothing intimidating, but I was holding this book like that.
I was about last in this very long queue. By the time I got there, I was just water. Margaret Atwood is this far from me. Magic, let it, brush off. So yeah, she
I
is
know.
definitely my hero.
She sounds like a good choice, then. Okay, so last question. Where can readers find out more about you and your books? And if you
Okay,
do you have website, social media, I'll put it all in the description anyway, but if you want to
yes,
tell people where they can best places to find you.
yeah. My website is very easy. It's cherylburman.com. So that's quite simple, and that brings me up. And the other place where I'm most active these days is on Facebook on my author page, which is Cheryl Burman Author at Facebook. So as we all have to do, I have a personal profile as well, which I mostly keep for personal stuff.
Mm.
Though I'm not averse to flogging my books there when something's new or something like that. But mostly my author page, which is growing slowly but nicely, and I have some regular visitors there. I
Mm.
do a writing prompt on there three times a week, which is quite fun. And I do post on there at least every day,
Oh, okay.
talk about things. So I enjoy that, and I belong to quite a few author groups and so on Facebook. So they're the two best places. The other thing to go straight to the books is just my Amazon author page. So just
Mm.
go onto Amazon and type in Cheryl Burman and I come up.
Brilliant. And I will put all the links in the description anyway, so if people want to just go and click, they can
So I
do.
need to send them all to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another job.
Bye.
Oh, well, thank you so much for giving up time today. It's so nice to actually talk rather than via an email or a
Yeah,
message.
yeah. No, we should
Um,
do it again.
Yeah,
Just chat.
just for a
Oh,
chat.
just one thing I was going to say is that, and I can't do this without mentioning these other people. You said before that writing is a lonely task. When COVID first struck, and I was still more active on X in those days, I set up a small group of fellow authors there in the US, and that was 5.5 years ago. And we now meet most afternoons and we write together. And if people can't make it, that's fine. They're not there. There's now four of us. And one's in Nebraska, one's in Champaign, Illinois, one's in Texas. And amazingly, my Texan friend, Paula, she came to visit the forest in September with her husband, John. And of course, after 5 years of Zooming, it was a bit scary.
Yeah,
But do you know what? We just had a blast. It was just so wonderful having them and meeting them.
yeah,
And I took them all around the forest and introduced them to, places they'd never get to see just as tourists and so on
yeah.
and so on. And we discovered that her husband, John, well, he knew he had family from long ago that he thought were buried in a churchyard across the other side of the river in Frampton-on-Severn. So we went looking, we found the cemetery and we found the gravestones. And I'm just thinking, so this friend of mine, whom I met randomly on Twitter years ago, her husband's family comes from, as the crow flies, 6 miles from where I live.
That's an amazing connection.
But they are my ongoing editors. We read to each other, mostly on a Friday. We read chapters if we've got them ready and so on. And we're brutal, absolutely brutal with each other.
Mm.
And we know each other so well. We know that we can just do that. So they're my critique partners, and we're just brilliant friends as well.
I
I'll
love
put the
it.
links to their books on
Yeah,
my yeah,
do. Yeah,
yeah,
I
because
think that's.
Jodie's just got a new cozy mystery out as well.
Oh,
Yeah,
to be honest, I think people are just always looking for good new books to read. So yeah,
yeah,
the more the
yeah.
merrier. We'll put a whole list on there.
No, no. Just
Starting with
mine
yours, obviously. We'll
at
have
the
yours at the
top.
top. And then in no particular order, everyone else's.
Well, alphabetically, I go first. It's okay.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. And we will talk again.
Yes, thank you so much, Laura. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the sunshine.
Thank
Bye.
you.